Millionaire catches woman covering his son's grave, and the truth shocks him. The morning was grey over St. Michael's Cemetery in Austin when Marcus Mitchell parked his black BMW among the century-old cypress trees. The 62-year-old businessman adjusted his dark tie and walked along the stone paths he knew by heart, carrying a bouquet of white carnations. It was the third anniversary since he had buried his only son, and the pain still cut like a razor every time he thought of James. But something was different on that October morning. As he approached the Mitchell family vault, Marcus stopped abruptly. There was an unknown woman leaning over James's grave, pouring concrete mix from a wheelbarrow, while two small children helped her with their little hands dirty with cement. The scene was so absurd that he had to blink several times to make sure he wasn't dreaming. The woman was about 40 years old, with brown hair tied in a messy bun, and wore simple clothes stained with dirt and cement. The boy, who seemed to be about 8 years old, held a small trowel and helped smooth the mix, while the girl, a bit younger, watched everything with childlike curiosity. They worked in concentrated silence, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Excuse me," Marcus shouted, dropping the flowers and running toward the grave. "What do you think you're doing?" The woman looked up without stopping her work, staring at him with a cold determination that unsettled him. Her brown eyes held a deep sadness, but also a firmness that spoke of decisions made after much suffering. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, continuing to smooth the concrete. "Not today." "I shouldn't be here?" Marcus felt indignation explode in his chest. "This is my son's grave. I've come here every week for 3 years. The woman finally stopped working and stood up, wiping her hands on an old cloth. She was shorter than him, but there was something in her posture that made her seem taller. "I know very well who you are, Marcus Mitchell," she said, pronouncing his name with a tone that mixed respect and bitterness. "And I know exactly what you did to James." The businessman felt his blood run cold. How did this unknown woman know his name? And what did she mean by what you did to James? "Who are you, and get those children away from there immediately." "Mommy," whispered the boy, tugging at the woman's blouse. "Is the man angry?" The woman placed a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. "Don't worry, Tyler, he won't do anything." Tyler. Marcus looked more closely at the boy. There was something familiar in those features, the shape of the eyes, the line of the chin. "My name is Sarah Johnson," said the woman, raising her chin. "I was James's girlfriend, and these are his daughters, your granddaughters whom you never bothered to meet." The world seemed to spin around Marcus. Granddaughters? James had never mentioned a serious girlfriend, let alone children, but looking now at the two children, he couldn't deny the resemblance. The boy Tyler had the same green eyes as the Mitchell family, and the girl, who couldn't be more than 6 years old, had the same face shape as James when he was a child. That's impossible," he stammered. James never told you because he was afraid," interrupted Sarah. "Afraid of what you would do, what you would say, afraid that you would destroy our lives like you destroyed his." "I never destroyed my son's life." Sarah laughed, but it was a sad laugh without humor. "Do you really believe that? After everything you did to him?" Marcus tried to approach the grave, but Sarah stepped in front, protecting the work she had done. The concrete was still fresh, completely covering the black marble headstone where the name James Mitchell was engraved. "Get that cement off there right now. I'm calling the cemetery administration." "Go ahead," said Sarah calmly. "They know I'm here. They know why I'm doing this." The children watched the argument with wide eyes. Tyler held his younger sister's hand, clearly trying to shield her from the tension in the air. "Is Grandpa mad, Tyler?" whispered the little girl. "He's not our grandpa, Madison," Tyler replied quietly. "Mom said he wants nothing to do with us." The words hit Marcus like punches to the stomach. Grandpa? Were those children really his grandchildren? How was it possible that James had hidden something so important? "Please," he said, trying to control his voice, "explain what's going on. If these children are really my grandchildren—" "They are," Sarah stated. "Tyler is 8. Madison is 6. James loved them more than anything in this world. Then why did he never tell me? Why did he never bring them to meet me?" Sarah looked at him with an expression mixing pity and indignation, because you made it perfectly clear that the only thing that mattered was James taking over the family business. Remember the last conversation you had, when you said he was a disappointment because he didn't have enough ambition? Marcus remembered. It had been a terrible argument, just a few months before James's accident. His son had suggested some changes in the company, ideas that Marcus had considered too immature and romantic for the business world. He had said harsh things, yes, but it was for James's own good, to prepare him to lead the company one day. "I only wanted what was best for him," he murmured. "What was best for him? Or what was best for you?" Sarah retorted. "Did you ever ask James what he really wanted from life?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Marcus opened his mouth to respond but realized he didn't know what to say. He had never really asked James about his dreams or personal ambitions. He had always assumed the boy would want to follow in his father's footsteps, inherit the empire he had built from scratch. "What do you mean by what I did to him?" he asked, feeling a strange weight in his chest. Sarah sighed and bent down to wipe the children's hands with a damp cloth. "Tyler, Madison, go play near that tree over there, but don't leave my sight." The children obeyed, walking hand in hand to a large fig tree a few yards away. As soon as they were alone, Sarah looked directly at Marcus. "James lost everything trying to impress you," she said quietly. "All the risky investments he made, all the desperate attempts to prove he was worthy of the Mitchell name. He used all our savings, sold the apartment we lived in, even pawned the wedding rings we exchanged." "What investments? James never asked me for money to invest in anything." "Exactly. He didn't ask because he knew you would question every penny, would take control of everything, so he tried to do it alone. He invested in a tech startup, then in stocks a friend recommended, then in a franchise that promised quick returns." Marcus felt his stomach sink. "And he lost everything?" "Everything," Sarah confirmed, her voice trembling slightly. "We were left with huge debt. We had to move out of our apartment and go live with my mother in a poor neighborhood in Round Rock. James was desperate. He said he couldn't go home and tell you he had failed once again." "Once again?" "Your words, not mine." "You failed once again, James. When are you going to grow up and take responsibility like a man?" Marcus remembered the phrase. He had said that when James suggested investing in renewable energy, something he considered a passing fad at the time, but it had just been a business discussion, not personal. "I was trying to teach him to be realistic. You were destroying his self-esteem, little by little, year after year. James would come home after meetings with you completely broken. I'm not good enough, Sarah. I'll never be the son my father wants." The words cut deep. Marcus had never realized the impact his criticisms had on James. To him, they were just professional guidance, ways to build the young man's character for the competitive business world. "So he decided to prove he could succeed on his own," Sarah continued. "And when everything went wrong, when we lost everything, he couldn't handle another disappointment." "The accident, it wasn't an accident," Sarah said, her voice almost a whisper. James took the car that night because he was running away. He was leaving town, disappearing so you wouldn't find out about the financial failure. The world seemed to stop. Marcus had to lean on a nearby headstone to keep from falling. "Are you saying my son was driving at high speed because he was desperate to get out of town before anyone found him? The road was wet, he lost control. But it wasn't an ordinary accident, Mr. Mitchell. It was the result of 3 years of despair and pressure." Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. His whole life he had blamed cruel fate, bad luck, the rain on the road. He never imagined that his own constant pressure could have contributed to what happened to James. "Why are you telling me this now? And why are you covering the grave?" Sarah looked at the concrete still drying on the headstone. "Because I discovered something that changed everything, something that will change your life too." "What?" "The grave is empty, Mr. Mitchell. James didn't die in that accident." The businessman felt his legs weaken. "What? What did you say?" "Your son is alive. And I know where he is." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of children playing under the fig tree. Marcus looked at the concrete-covered grave, then at Sarah, trying to process what he had just heard. "That's impossible. I saw the body, went to the hospital, arranged the funeral." "You saw an unrecognizable body after a serious accident," Sarah corrected. "The doctors identified James by the documents found in the car, but he wasn't in the car when the accident happened." Marcus shook his head, refusing to believe. "That doesn't make sense. If he didn't die, where has he been all these years? Why didn't he come home?" "Because he wanted you to think he had died. It was the only way he saw to escape the pressure, the constant feeling of failure. He left the documents in the car on purpose and hitched a ride on a back road." "But I identified the body." "You looked for 2 seconds at a disfigured body and confirmed what you wanted to believe," Sarah said harshly. "You were so convinced James had died that you didn't even question it. And the doctors were in a hurry. There were other injured people arriving. No one made a more careful identification." Marcus remembered that terrible day at the hospital. The body was truly unrecognizable, and he had been in such shock that he could barely look properly. He confirmed the identification quickly, just to end that torture. "If this is true, if James is alive, and where has he been all these years? Why didn't he get in touch?" Sarah hesitated before answering. "He did get in touch. With me. After we organized the funeral, after you cried and blamed yourself publicly, he called me from a small town in Tennessee." "And you didn't tell me?" "He made me promise not to. Said he finally felt free, that he could breathe without feeling the weight of your expectations on his shoulders." Marcus felt anger mixing with relief and pain. "So you both deceived me all these years, let me suffer thinking my son was dead? Do you think it was easy for me, raising 2 daughters alone, making up excuses about why their father wasn't present, watching Tyler ask why Grandpa never came to visit?" The children looked up toward them when they heard their mother's raised voice. Sarah took a deep breath and waved at them, signaling everything was fine. "James sends money every month," she continued in a lower voice. "Not much, because he works at a rural school teaching underprivileged children. But he sends what he can to help with the girls. He's a teacher." Marcus couldn't imagine his son, who was always destined to run a multinational company, teaching children at a country school. "Math and science teacher, says he's never been happier in his life. But all the education I gave him, all the opportunities you chose for him," Sarah corrected. "Did you ever ask what James wanted to do? He always liked teaching. Remember when he gave private lessons to the employees' children? You said it was a waste of time." Marcus vaguely remembered. James had spent a few months helping employees' children with math and English. Marcus had thought it irrelevant, a distraction from real goals. "He had a way with children," he admitted reluctantly. "Has," corrected Sarah, "and he's very good at it. The school where he works has had the highest test scores in the region for the past 2 years. Marcus looked at Tyler and Madison, who had found some wildflowers and were carefully picking them. They were his grandchildren, and he had never even suspected their existence. "What are they like?" he asked quietly. Sarah's face softened for the first time. "Tyler is just like his father, shy but very smart, loves math and wants to be an engineer when he grows up. Madison is more outgoing, loves drawing and making up stories. She has an incredible imagination." "Do they know about me?" "They know they have a rich grandfather who never wanted to meet them." The words hurt more than any slap in the face. "I didn't know they existed." "And why didn't you know?" "Because James was so afraid of disappointing you that he preferred to hide his own family. He thought you would criticize his choice to date someone from a different social class, would question whether he was financially ready to be a father." Marcus opened his mouth to deny it, but remembered other times when he had done exactly that. Criticized James's personal choices based on financial and social criteria. "I want to see him," he said finally. "I want to talk to James." "No." "What do you mean, no?" "He doesn't want to see you. Made that very clear in the last letters we exchanged." "Letters?" Sarah sighed. "It's not just money he sends. He writes letters to the girls, tells them about his work, asks about their school. He's a present father from a distance." "And about me? Does he ask about me?" Sarah hesitated before answering. "Sometimes. Wants to know if you're in good health, if the company is doing well, but always makes clear he doesn't want to reconnect." Marcus felt something break inside his chest. His son was alive but still preferred to pretend to be dead rather than see him again. "What do I need to do?" he asked. "How can I prove I've changed?" "Changed?" Sarah stared at him with skepticism. "Have you really changed? Or are you just saying that because you found out James is alive?" Marcus didn't know how to answer immediately. Had he changed? Over the past 3 years, since James's supposed death, he had become more introspective, less strict with his employees, more willing to listen to different opinions. But was it just a consequence of grief or a real change? I tried to be a better father." "For whom?" "James was dead. How can you try to be a better father to someone who no longer exists?" Sarah's cruel logic hit him hard. He had regretted it, yes, but mainly because he no longer had the chance to fix things. Was it genuine regret, or just self-pity? "The girls," he said suddenly, looking at the children, Can I get to know my granddaughters better?" "Why? To make up for the mistakes you made with James? To feel better about yourself?" "Because they are my family. Because I missed 3 years of their lives and I don't want to miss any more." Sarah studied his face for a long moment. "Tyler, Madison, come here." The children ran over to them, Tyler holding a small bouquet of wild daisies he had picked. "These are for Dad," he said, offering the flowers to Sarah. "To put on his grave." Marcus felt his heart tighten. Tyler still believed his father was dead and buried there. "Tyler," Sarah said carefully, "this man is your grandfather, Marcus, your dad's father." The boy looked at Marcus with curiosity, but without fear. "Are you really rich? Mum said you have a very big company." "I do," replied Marcus, bending down to be at the child's level. "But that's not the most important thing about me." "What is then?" asked Madison, less shy than her brother. Marcus looked at Sarah, then back at the girl. "Being your grandfather, that is much more important." Tyler exchanged a glance with his sister. "Mum, why did Grandpa never come to visit us before?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah waited to see how Marcus would respond. "Because I made a lot of mistakes," he said slowly. "I hurt your dad without realizing it, and he was afraid to introduce me to you." "Dad was afraid of you?" asked Tyler, surprised. "He was. And I don't want you to be afraid of me, too." Madison moved a little closer. "Will you get mad at us if we do something wrong?" The innocent question revealed exactly the kind of father Marcus had been. James had grown up fearing disappointing his father, and now his daughters were afraid of the same thing. "Never," promised Marcus. "Grandpas don't get mad at grandchildren. Grandpas give affection and tell stories." "Do you know stories?" Madison's eyes shone. "I know many. Can I tell you some?" The children looked at their mother, asking for permission. Sarah nodded slowly. "But first," she said, "you need to know something important about your dad. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." Tyler and Madison moved closer to their mother, sensing she had something serious to say. "What is it, Mom?" asked Tyler. Sarah took a deep breath, looked at Marcus, then back at the children. "Your dad isn't really here in this grave." "What do you mean?" Tyler was confused. "He is alive, my love. Dad is alive and lives in another city working as a teacher." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler's eyes widened, trying to process the information, while Madison looked from Sarah to the grave and back to her mother. But we always come here to talk to him," whispered Tyler. "I know, my love. And Dad knows that you come. He knows that you love him. If Daddy is alive, why doesn't he come see us?" Madison's voice was beginning to tremble. Sarah knelt down to be at the children's level. "Because Daddy was very sad when you were little. He thought it would be better to leave for a while." "Sad because of us?" Tyler was almost crying. "No, not because of you. You are the most precious things in his life. He was sad for other reasons. Adult things you don't need to worry about." Marcus watched the scene with a broken heart. Because of his own limitations as a father, his grandchildren had grown up without knowing their own dad. "Can I talk to Daddy?" asked Madison. "He calls sometimes," said Sarah. "Talks to you, asks about school, about friends." "The man who sometimes calls at night?" Tyler's eyes widened. "That's Daddy." Sarah nodded, and Marcus realized that James had indeed been in contact with his daughters, just without revealing his true identity. "Why did you say he was a family friend?" Tyler seemed confused. "Because Daddy asked me not to tell yet. He wanted to be sure he was ready to come home." "And is he ready now?" Madison asked hopefully. Sarah looked at Marcus. "I don't know, sweetie. That depends on many things." "Does it depend on Grandpa?" Tyler had caught the look between the adults. "Partly, yes." Marcus felt crushed by the weight of responsibility. The future of that entire family depended on his ability to prove he had really changed. "Tyler, Madison," he said carefully, "I would really like to get to know you better. I'd like to spend some time with you, if Mommy allows." "Will you take us to see the company?" Tyler asked excitedly. The innocent question revealed exactly what was wrong. Marcus had offered James only the world of business, never asking what the boy really wanted. "If you want to see it, of course, but I'd rather know what you like to do. What do you play?" "I like to draw," Madison said timidly, "and to make up stories about princesses." "And I like math," Tyler added. "I want to build bridges when I grow up." Marcus smiled for the first time since he had arrived at the cemetery. "Then let's draw and do math together, and I want to hear all of Madison's stories." The children exchanged shy smiles. Sarah watched everything cautiously, clearly trying to decide if she could trust this man. "We need to go," she said finally. "The children have tutoring in the afternoon." Can I see them again? Maybe take them to lunch someday?" Sarah hesitated. "I'll think about it. Please. I know I made terrible mistakes with James. I don't want to make the same mistakes with Tyler and Madison." "Words are easy, Mr. Marcus. James heard many promises that were never kept. Then give me the chance to prove it with actions." Sarah gathered the tools in the wheelbarrow, signaling that the conversation was over. "I'll leave my phone number with you, but I want to make one thing clear. If you hurt these children in any way, if you bring them the same kind of pressure and impossible expectations you brought James, I will disappear with them, and this time you will never find us." The threat was spoken with such calm and determination that Marcus had no doubt she would carry it out. Sarah was a woman who had learned to protect her family at all costs. "Understood," he said. "I won't hurt them, I promise. Tyler, Madison, let's go." The children said goodbye timidly to their newly discovered grandfather. Tyler waved with his dirt-stained hand, and Madison whispered an almost inaudible, "Bye, Grandpa." Marcus stood still in the cemetery, watching the small family walk away. James Mitchell's grave remained covered in fresh concrete, like a symbol of all the deceptions and lies that had built up over the years. But his son was alive, and he had 2 granddaughters he barely knew, but already loved desperately. He picked up his phone and called his secretary. "Cancel all my appointments for the week. I have urgent personal matters to attend to." For the first time in his 40-year career, business would have to wait. In the days that followed, Marcus found himself in a completely new situation, trying to win the trust of 2 children who barely knew him, while dealing with the discovery that his son was alive and refusing any contact with him. Sarah had allowed him to take Tyler and Madison to lunch at the mall, but only on the condition that she accompany them. The afternoon had been a revelation. Marcus discovered that Tyler was fascinated by numbers and construction, but also loved board games and had an infectious laugh. Madison proved to be a natural artist, drawing elaborate characters and inventing complex stories for each one. But what impressed him most was the upbringing they had received. They were polite, generous, intelligent children, everything he had always wished James would be, but had never realized his son already was. "How did you manage to raise them so well on your own?" he asked Sarah, as the children played in the mall's playground. "Not on my own," she replied. "James was always involved in the important decisions, even from a distance, and my mother helps a lot." "Your mother?" "Mrs. Helen. She takes care of the children when I work." What do you do for work? I'm a nurse at the Round Rock Health Clinic. I work the night shift so I can be with the children during the day. Marcus felt even more humiliated. While he slept in his 15-bedroom mansion, his daughter-in-law worked nights to support his granddaughters. Sarah, I'd like to help financially, for the children's education for... No. Why not? Because I don't want the children growing up thinking money solves everything. They need to learn the value of things. They need to understand that achievements come from effort, not expensive gifts. Marcus realized he was hearing exactly what he had always tried to teach James, but through a completely different approach. Sarah taught values through example, not pressure, but they could have a better life, study at better schools. They attend the municipal school and are at the top of their class. They don't need expensive schools. They need support and encouragement. Like James, murmured Marcus, more to himself. Like James, Sarah agreed. He was always brilliant. He just needed someone who believed in him instead of constantly criticizing him. That night, alone in his empty house, Marcus tried to process everything he had discovered. His son was alive, working as a teacher in some small town in Tennessee. His granddaughters were wonderful children who had grown up without knowing him, and all of this because of his own mistakes as a father. He decided to write a letter to James. "My son," he began, but stopped. How do you address someone who preferred to pretend to be dead rather than speak to his own father? He tried again. "James, I know you don't want contact with me, but I need to say a few things. I met Tyler and Madison. They're amazing children, and I can see your love and dedication in every gesture of theirs. You are a much better father than I ever was." He crumpled the paper and threw it away. It sounded forced, desperate. On the third attempt, he simply wrote, "You were right, and I was wrong. About everything. Forgive me." But he threw that away too. How could a letter make up for years of pressure and criticism? The next day he called Sarah. "I want to know more about the school where James works. I want to understand who he became." "Why?" "Because I realized I never really knew my son. We spent 25 years in the same house, and I didn't know who he truly was." Sarah remained silent for a moment. "He works at a rural school near Gatlinburg. He teaches math and science to children from very poor families. The school has no resources, barely enough textbooks. And is he happy?" "For the first time in his life, yes. He writes to me about each student, about the progress they make, about how rewarding it is to see a child understand a new concept." Marcus felt a mix of pride and sadness. Pride because his son had found purpose and happiness. Sadness because this happiness was only possible when James completely distanced himself from him. "Can I make a donation to the school? Anonymously?" "You can try," said Sarah with some skepticism, "but James is very proud. If he finds out the money came from you, he might even leave the school. Then how can I help without him knowing?" "I don't know if you can. James knows you well. He'll suspect anything too good to be true that happens at the school." Marcus hung up the phone, frustrated. How could he fix 3 decades of mistakes if James wouldn't even accept his remorse? The answer came from an unexpected source, Tyler. During another visit with the children, the boy asked a question that would change everything. "Grandpa, why have you never visited our school?" Marcus looked at Sarah, who shrugged. "I don't know where your school is." "It's close to home. We can walk there. Want to see?" And that's how Marcus found himself, on a Thursday morning, walking through the streets of Round Rock alongside 2 excited children who wanted to show their school to their grandfather. The municipal school professor, John Williams, was a simple 2-story building with peeling paint and a cracked concrete playground, but the children spoke of it as if it were the most special place in the world. "This is where we play during recess," explained Madison, pointing to a small playground with rusty equipment. "And over there is our classroom," added Tyler. "Teacher Jennifer is really cool. She lets us do science experiments." Marcus watched other children arriving for classes. Many came on foot, some by bicycle, others by a noisy school bus. They all seemed happy to be there, greeting teachers and classmates with enthusiasm. "Is it a good school?" he asked. "It's the best," replied Madison without hesitation. "We learn a ton of things." Tyler nodded vigorously. And there's a library. Want to see, Grandpa? The library was a small room with plywood shelves and a few dozen books, but Tyler and Madison presented it as if it were the National Library. I've already read all these books here, said Tyler, pointing to a low shelf with children's books. And I draw stories based on these here, added Madison, showing a section with fairy tales. Marcus spoke with some teachers and was impressed by their dedication. They worked with minimal resources but maintained genuine enthusiasm for the children's education. Are you Tyler and Madison's grandfather? Asked the principal, a woman around 50 years old named Mrs. Dorothy. They always talk about their rich grandpa who has a big company. I do have a company, replied Marcus, a bit embarrassed. It's good that you finally came to see our school. The children were so happy when they found out you were going to visit them here. Marcus realized that, for Tyler and Madison, the simple fact of him showing up at their school was a source of immense pride. They introduced him to their friends as if he were a celebrity. Grandpa, can you tell my class about your company? Asked Tyler. The teacher was explaining about different professions and I said you're a businessman. That's how Marcus found himself an hour later in a classroom with 28-year-old children trying to explain what he did for a living in a way that made sense to them. My company builds buildings, he said simply. Buildings where people live and work. Like houses? Asked one girl. Bigger than houses. Buildings with many floors and many apartments. And do you build them with your own hands? A boy wanted to know. No, I organize other people who build. Engineers, architects, construction workers. Many people work together to make a building. Tyler raised his hand. Grandpa, is it true that you're rich? His grandson's direct question caught him by surprise. The other children fell silent, clearly curious about the answer. I do have money, yes, Marcus answered honestly. But that's not the most important thing about me. What is then? Asked Madison. Marcus looked at his granddaughters, then at the other children in the room. They were all watching him with genuine attention, waiting for an answer that made sense in their 8-year-old worlds. The most important thing is that I'm Tyler and Madison's grandfather, he said finally, and that I'm learning to be a better grandfather every day. The children smiled, satisfied with the answer. For them, titles and wealth mattered far less than relationships and affection. After class, Marcus talked more with the teacher and the principal. He discovered the school was facing serious financial difficulties. They lacked computers, books, basic school supplies. The roof leaked, the paint was peeling, and there was no money for repairs. But the children learn anyway, Mrs. Dorothy said with pride. We have dedicated teachers and hard-working children. We work miracles with the little we have. Marcus left the school with an idea. He couldn't help James directly, but he could help his grandchildren's school. And perhaps through this help he could show that he had truly changed. But first, he needed a plan that wouldn't arouse suspicion. That night, he called his lawyer. I want to create a foundation, he said, to help public schools with limited resources. What kind of help? Renovations, equipment, teaching materials. I want to start with a specific school in Round Rock. Any special reason for that school? My grandchildren study there. The lawyer was surprised. I didn't know you had grandchildren. I didn't either until last week. It's a long story. In the following days, Marcus immersed himself in the project of helping the school. But the more he researched public education in the United States, the more he realized the scale of the problems. Tyler and Madison's school wasn't an exception, it was the rule. Thousands of schools across the country faced the same difficulties. And thinking about this, he had a revelation. Perhaps this was the purpose that had always been missing in his life. He had built a financial empire, but for what? To leave money to a son who preferred to pretend he was dead rather than speak to him. He decided it was time to redefine his priorities. Sarah, he said during one of their phone conversations, can I ask you a question about James? That depends on the question. When he was a child, did he show interest in social causes, in helping people? Sarah was surprised by the question. Why do you want to know? Because I'm trying to understand who my son really is, and I realize I spent my whole life trying to mold him into what I thought he should be, instead of discovering who he wanted to be. James was always sensitive to injustices, she said after a pause. As a child, he would bring stray dogs home, wanted to give money to every homeless person he met. I remember one time, he must have been about 12, he asked you to donate his birthday party money to a family who had lost their home in a fire, Marcus vaguely recalled. I told him he could do that when he was an adult and had his own money. And he never mentioned it again. But I knew he kept thinking about it. How? He saved his allowance to buy food for homeless people. He did it secretly because he knew you would think it was silly. Marcus felt a pang of guilt. How many aspects of James's personality had he suppressed without realizing? And now, as a teacher, does he still have these social concerns? More than ever. In the last letter I received, he told me about a student who missed classes because she didn't have shoes. He used part of his own salary to buy her a pair. Marcus closed his eyes. His son had become exactly the kind of person he had always wanted to be, but never had the courage to become. Rich in money, but poor in compassion. Sarah, I need to find a way to help the school where James works, without him knowing it's me. Why? Because I want to do something I know he would approve of. Something that shows I finally understand what's really important. And what do you hope to achieve with this? Marcus thought about the question. What did he really hope for? That James would come running back home? That everything would be magically forgiven? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I just want to do the right thing for the first time in my life. Maybe I want to be the kind of father James always needed, even if it's too late. Sarah remained silent for a long moment. The school where he works is called Rural Municipal School St. John's Valley. It's near Gatlinburg. It's even more underfunded than Tyler and Madison's school. Thank you. Mr. Mitchell? Yes. If you do this, do it right. Not as a display of power or wealth. Do it as someone who genuinely cares about those children. How can I do that? I know nothing about education. Learn. That's what James did. He studied education at night while teaching during the day. If you really want to understand your son, you need to understand his world. Marcus hung up the phone with a strange feeling. For the first time in decades, he had a goal that wasn't related to profit or business growth. He wanted to learn about education. The following week, he enrolled in an extension course about public education at the local university. He also started reading everything he could find about teaching methods, education policies, and challenges of rural schools. Tyler and Madison were fascinated when they found out their grandfather was studying. Grandpa became a student? Madison asked, amused. Anyone can learn new things, Marcus replied. It's never too late for that. What are you studying? Tyler wanted to know. I'm learning about schools and how to help children learn better. Tyler's eyes lit up. Like our dad does? The innocent question hit Marcus hard. Yes, exactly like the son he had pushed away for not understanding his worth. Exactly like your dad, he confirmed. That night Marcus had an idea. If he really wanted to understand James, he needed to see the world through his eyes. And the best way to do that would be by visiting the school where he worked, anonymously. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Marcus rented a simple car and drove to Gatlinburg the following weekend. The historic Tennessee town was about 3 hours' drive from Austin, and the road wound through mountains and valleys he had never explored before. St. John's Valley was a rural community 20 kilometers from Gatlinburg, accessible only by a dirt road. When Marcus arrived on Saturday morning, he found a small village with fewer than 500 inhabitants, surrounded by subsistence farms and cattle ranches. The rural municipal school, St. John's Valley, was a simple single-story building with 4 classrooms, a small library that also served as the teacher's lounge, and a dirt courtyard where some children played even on the weekend. Marcus parked at a safe distance and observed. There was a man about 30 years old painting one of the school's exterior walls. He had his back turned, focused on the work, but there was something familiar about his posture, the way he moved his arms. Marcus's heart stopped. It was James. His son was alive, right there, just a few meters away. The urge to run to him and hug him was almost irresistible. Marcus had to hold onto the steering wheel to keep from running out. 3 years of pain, guilt, and longing exploded in his chest, and he felt tears burning in his eyes. James had changed. He was thinner, with stubble and longer hair. He wore simple clothes, old jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt, but he seemed calm. There was a serenity in his movements that Marcus had never seen before. Some children approached James, offering to help with the painting. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that made Marcus's heart ache even more, and handed them smaller brushes. "Teacher James, can I paint here?" shouted a girl about 7 years old. "Of course, Emma, but be careful not to get too dirty, or your mum will scold me." James's voice. Marcus hadn't heard it in 3 years, and it was exactly the same, but with a tone of patience and affection he didn't remember hearing before. "Teacher, are you going to teach math today?" asked a boy. "Not today, Noah. It's Saturday, a day for playing and resting. I'm here because the paint arrived yesterday and I don't want it to spoil in the sun." Marcus watched his son interact with the children for another hour. James was clearly loved and respected by them. They called him to referee games, asked for advice, told stories, and he listened to everything with genuine attention, answering each question as if it were the most important thing in the world. It was exactly the kind of father Marcus had never been. When James finished painting and prepared to leave, Marcus made an impulsive decision. He got out of the car and approached the school, pretending to be a curious visitor. "Excuse me," he called out as James came near the gate. "Is this the community school?" James turned around, and Marcus felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. He was face to face with his son for the first time in 3 years. James looked more mature, with small wrinkles around his eyes that weren't there before, but his green eyes remained the same. If James recognized him, he didn't show it. He just nodded politely. "Yes, it is. The Rural Municipal School, St. John's Valley. Can I help you with something?" The voice was controlled, professional. James was treating him like a stranger. "I'm visiting the area and was curious about the school. It's a small community. I imagined it would be hard to maintain a school here." "It's a challenge," James admitted, "but the children deserve a quality education, no matter where they live." "Do you work here?" "I'm a math and science teacher. And you, sir?" "Williams. John Williams." The fake name came out automatically. "I work in educational consulting." Marcus saw a shadow of suspicion cross James's eyes, but it quickly disappeared. "What kind of consulting?" "I help companies identify schools that need support, donations, equipment, that sort of thing." It wasn't entirely a lie. That was exactly what he was planning to do. "I understand," said James, but his tone grew more cautious. "Well, if you'd like to see the school, I can show you around quickly, although there isn't much to see." James opened the gate and guided him through the 4 classrooms. Marcus saw old desks, scratched blackboards, worn-out textbooks, but he also saw colorful drawings on the walls, students' work proudly displayed, and an atmosphere of affection and care that transcended the lack of material resources. "How many children study here?" asked Marcus. 62, from 5 to 14 years old. We have multigrade classes. Sometimes we mix different ages in the same group." "And how many teachers?" 3. Me, teacher Rebecca, who teaches English and history, and teacher Amanda, who handles early childhood education. It must be difficult teaching math to such different ages. James smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Marcus had seen. "It's challenging, but it's also amazing. The older kids help the younger ones, and everyone learns together. Sometimes an 8-year-old explains something in a way that a 12-year-old understands better than when I explain it." There was real passion in James's voice. Marcus had never seen him talk about anything with such enthusiasm. "Do you like what you do?" "I love it," James replied without hesitation. "It's the most rewarding work I've ever had." The words cut deep. James had found professional fulfillment only after completely stepping away from the life Marcus had planned for him. "And resources? Does the school have the necessary support?" James laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "What do you think? Look around. We don't have computers. The library has about 50 books. The roof leaks when it rains hard. The teachers use their own money to buy basic supplies." "But you keep working." We keep working, because these children deserve a chance at a better future, and education is their only way out. Marcus felt immense pride in his son, mixed with shame for himself. James was doing exactly what he had always criticized, working with passion for a cause instead of focusing on profit. "Mr. Williams," James said suddenly, "may I ask you a question?" "Of course. Do you really work in educational consulting, or are you a journalist?" The question caught Marcus by surprise. "Why do you ask?" "Because your questions are very specific, and because there's something familiar about you that I can't place." Marcus felt panic rising in his throat. James was starting to suspect his identity. "I really do work in consulting," he insisted. "Maybe we met at some education event." James studied him carefully for a moment that seemed eternal. Then he shook his head. "That must be it. Well, if your company really does help underprivileged schools, I'd be grateful for any support you could give. Not for me, but for the children. I'll bring your information to my team," Marcus promised. "Maybe we can do something." "Thank you. But if I may offer some advice, if you decide to help, do it right. Not as marketing or a display of power. Do it because you genuinely care about education." The words echoed what Sarah had said. Both his father and ex-girlfriend knew Marcus's tendency to turn everything into a matter of ego and control. "I understand perfectly," said Marcus. "You're right." James nodded and headed toward an old motorcycle parked near the school. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Williams. I hope your visit proves productive." "James," Marcus called out impulsively. His son stopped and turned around, surprised that a stranger knew his name. "How do you know my name?" Marcus thought quickly. "Didn't you introduce yourself? Sorry, I must have confused you with someone else." James stared at him with renewed suspicion. "No, I didn't introduce myself." Marcus's heart raced. He had made a terrible mistake. "One of the children called you Professor James," he lied desperately. "That must have been it." James kept looking at him for a few seconds, then shrugged. "That must be it then. Goodbye, Mr. Williams." Marcus watched his son leave on the noisy motorcycle, kicking up a small cloud of dust on the dirt road. He had just spent an hour talking with James, and his son hadn't shown any sign of missing him or wanting to come home. In fact, he seemed genuinely happy for the first time Marcus could remember. The trip back to Austin was one of the hardest of Marcus's life. His mind couldn't stop processing the discovery. James was alive, he was well, he was doing work he loved. But he was also completely content without having Marcus in his life. It was liberating and devastating at the same time. He arrived home determined to help James's school, but now for different reasons. Not to impress his son or force a reconciliation, but because he had seen children who deserved a better chance, just like Tyler and Madison deserved. On Monday, he called his lawyer. "I want to speed up the foundation process," he said, "and I want it operational within a month. That's very fast for all the legal procedures. Find a way. Pay whatever is necessary to speed up the process." "May I ask what the hurry is?" "I found a school that needs urgent help, and I don't want to wait another 6 months to start." In the following days, Marcus immersed himself in the foundation project with a dedication that surprised even his closest employees. He who always delegated everything now wanted to personally participate in every decision, every detail of the planning. "Sir," said his secretary, "you have important meetings on Thursday about the shopping center project." "Cancel them." "Cancel? But they're important investors." "I said cancel. I have more urgent commitments." "What commitments?" "I'm going to visit my granddaughter's school." The secretary was speechless. In 15 years working for Marcus, she had never heard of granddaughters. "You have granddaughters, sir?" "I do, Tyler and Madison, 8 and 6 years old. And apparently I'm the worst grandfather in the world, so I need to improve." On Thursday, Marcus showed up at Tyler and Madison's school with a surprise. He had brought an engineer and an architect to assess what renovations the building needed. "Grandpa," shouted Madison, running to hug him, "what are you doing here?" "I came to see if I could help improve your school," he replied, returning the hug. Tyler approached more cautiously. At 8 years old, he was naturally more observant than his sister. "How are you going to improve it?" Well, my company knows how to build and renovate buildings. I thought I'd take a look to see what needs fixing. The whole school, said Madison excitedly. The roof leaks, the paint is peeling, and the playground is rusty. Mrs. Dorothy, the principal, appeared to greet Marcus. Mr. Mitchell, what an honor to have you here again. The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Dorothy. I brought some professionals to assess what improvements we can make to the school. Improvements? My company is going to make a donation to renovate the building, new roof, painting, equipment, whatever is needed. Mrs. Dorothy's eyes widened. That's wonderful. But it must cost a lot of money. Don't worry about money. It's an investment in the children's future. Tyler tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Grandpa, will the school become as nice as the rich kids' school? The innocent question revealed exactly why this project was important. Why should a smart kid like Tyler have fewer opportunities just because he was born into a family with fewer resources? It's going to be better than the rich kids' school, promised Marcus, because it will have the best students. Madison clapped her hands, excited. Tyler smiled, still processing the magnitude of what was happening. Will the other kids be jealous because our grandpa is rich? He asked, showing early maturity. No, replied Marcus, kneeling down to be at the boy's level, because I'm not doing this because I'm rich. I'm doing it because you deserve it. All the kids at the school deserve it. That afternoon, while the architect and engineer took measurements and notes, Marcus talked with teachers and staff. He discovered inspiring stories of professional dedication, but also sad accounts of limitations caused by lack of resources. You have no idea what this means to us, said Tyler's teacher. Some roofs leak so much that we have to stop classes when it rains heavily. And the computers? Asked Marcus. Do the children have access to technology? The teacher laughed sadly. We have 3 old computers that barely work, for 60 students. That will change, promised Marcus. By the end of the afternoon, he had committed to a complete renovation. New roof, interior and exterior painting, computer lab with 20 new computers, complete playground renovation, library expansion, and installation of air conditioning in all classrooms. Grandpa, said Tyler as they walked to the car, thank you for helping our school. You don't need to thank me. It's the least I can do. Mum is going to be surprised when we tell her. Marcus smiled. How about we keep the renovation as a surprise? Let's not tell anyone until everything is ready. Actually, he didn't want the news to reach James through Sarah. He wasn't ready yet to deal with his son's questions about his motives. In the following weeks, Marcus became practically a resident at Tyler and Madison's school. He personally supervised every detail of the renovation, ensuring everything was done with the highest quality. You don't need to come here every day, said Mrs. Dorothy. We trust your workers. I want to make sure everything is perfect, replied Marcus. These children deserve the best. But the truth was, he was enjoying being there. For the first time in his life, he was using his wealth for something that brought real satisfaction, not just profit. Seeing the children's excitement as the school transformed was more rewarding than any deal he had ever closed. Tyler and Madison visited him at the construction site every afternoon, fascinated with the progress. Marcus discovered he loved explaining to them how the different construction stages worked. Grandpa, why do you need to put this mesh before the paint? Asked Madison. So the wall gets really smooth and the paint doesn't peel, he explained patiently. And why do the computers need special wires? Because computers use a lot of power and regular wires might not handle it. Tyler absorbed every explanation like a sponge, asking increasingly detailed questions. Marcus realized the boy had a real interest in engineering and construction. Tyler, would you like to visit a big construction site someday, one where we're building a whole building? The boy's eyes lit up. Can I? Really? Of course. Next weekend if your mom allows it. That's how Marcus found himself on a Saturday morning, taking Tyler to see the construction of a 20-story residential building in downtown Austin. It's huge, exclaimed Tyler, looking up with his neck stretched. It really is. And it will be home to over 100 families when it's finished. Marcus presented his grandson to the construction engineer, who patiently explained how the machines worked, how the weight each floor could support was calculated, and how the distribution of water and electricity was planned. Tyler asked smart questions and showed impressive understanding for an 8-year-old. Marcus felt immense pride, mixed with sadness for having lost so much time without knowing that brilliant grandson. "Grandpa," Tyler said on the way back, "thank you for bringing me. It was the best day of my life." "For me too, Tyler. For me too." That night, Marcus called Sarah to tell her about the outing. "Tyler hasn't stopped talking about the construction," she said. "He drew the whole building from memory. He has a talent for engineering. He's very smart." "He takes after his father," said Sarah, and there was sadness in her voice. "Sarah, can I ask a question? Does James know about my visits to the children?" "He does. I tell him everything in my letters." "And what does he say?" "That he's happy you finally met his daughters, but that it doesn't change anything between you two." Marcus felt his chest tighten. Will he never forgive me? I don't know. James carries a lot of hurt, Mr. Mitchell. It's not just about professional pressure. It's about never having felt unconditionally loved by his father. But I always loved him. You loved what you wanted him to be, not who he really was. Sarah's cruel but accurate observation hit him like a slap. She was right. Marcus had loved the idea of James as his successor, but he had never really known or appreciated the person his son was. How can I show I've changed if he refuses to see me? I don't know if you can. Some things can't be fixed with money or grand gestures, Mr. Mitchell. Sometimes the only thing we can do is accept the consequences of our choices. Marcus hung up the phone with a heavy heart, but also with renewed determination. If he couldn't fix the relationship with James, at least he could try to be the grandfather Tyler and Madison deserved, and he could keep helping children like them, honoring the work his son had chosen to do. The following week, the renovation of Tyler and Madison's school was completed. The result was spectacular. The building looked new with vibrant paint, a completely renovated roof, a colorful and modern playground, and a computer lab that would make expensive private schools envious. "My goodness!" exclaimed Mrs. Dorothy when she saw the final result. "I can't believe this is the same school." The children ran through the renewed playground shouting with joy. Tyler and Madison were beaming, showing off every new detail to their friends. "Grandpa, the school looks just like a palace," said Madison, jumping on the new playground. "Better than a palace," replied Marcus, "because here you'll learn things that are more valuable than treasures." The school reopening party was a community event. Parents, staff, students, and local residents came to celebrate. Marcus was honored as the patron of the renovation, but he insisted the real credit belonged to the teachers and students. "This school has always been special," he said in his brief speech. "Now it just has the physical structure that matches the human quality that was already here." After the party, while helping to take down the decorations, Marcus was approached by an elderly man he didn't know. "Mr. Mitchell, my name is Robert Johnson. I'm Sarah's father." Marcus was surprised. It was the children's maternal grandfather. "Mr. Johnson, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I wanted to thank you for what you did for the school. Tyler and Madison won't stop talking about the grandpa who turned their school into a palace. It was a pleasure to help." Robert Johnson studied him carefully. "Can I be direct with you?" "Of course." "Sarah told me about James, about everything that happened. She also told me that you're trying to make amends." Marcus nodded, not knowing what to say. "My daughter is a very strong woman," John continued. "She raised these girls practically alone, works nights to support them, never complained about anything. But I know it was difficult. I imagine so. What I mean is, if you've really changed, if you really want to be part of these children's lives, do it right. Don't disappoint them like you disappointed their father." The warning was spoken kindly, but Marcus felt the weight of responsibility. Tyler and Madison had already suffered enough from their father's absence. They couldn't handle the disappointment of a grandfather who promised more than he could deliver. "I understand, Mr. Johnson, and you're right to warn me I won't disappoint these children. I hope not, because if you do, you'll have to answer to me." Marcus smiled, despite the seriousness of the conversation. He liked that man. There was strength and dignity in him that were evident in his daughters and granddaughters. "Can I ask you a question?" said Marcus. "How did you manage to raise a daughter as strong as Sarah?" Robert Johnson smiled for the first time. "By showing her I loved her every day, not just when she did what I wanted, and by listening to what she had to say even when I didn't agree." The simple words contained all the wisdom that Marcus had taken 60 years to begin to understand. That night, alone in his big empty house, Marcus made a decision. It was time to put everything he had learned into practice. He wanted to help James's school, but this time he would do it differently. Not as a demonstration of power or an attempt to impress his son, but as a natural continuation of the work James had chosen to do. He called the architect who had worked on Tyler and Madison's school. "I need you to design a renovation project for another school, this time in a rural community near Gatlinburg." "Of course, Mr. Mitchell. When can I go there to do the assessment?" "I'll arrange that. But there's one condition. This project must be completely anonymous. No one at the school can know that I'm responsible for the donation." "How will we justify the renovation then?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Say it's a donation from a private educational foundation. Don't mention my name or my company's name at any time." "Understood. And I want it to be the best renovation we've ever done. This school serves children who have very little. I want to give them the best we can." The following week, Marcus returned to St. John's Valley, this time accompanied by the architect and a representative from his newly created foundation, who introduced himself as the project coordinator. James was at the school when they arrived, teaching a mixed class of children of different ages. Marcus stood outside the classroom watching through the window. His son was explaining fractions using imaginary pieces of cake, drawing on the blackboard and getting the children to actively participate in the class. A girl about 10 years old raised her hand. "Teacher James, if I divide a cake into 8 pieces and eat 3, how much is left?" "Good question, Rebecca. Let's see. If there were 8 pieces and you ate 3, how much is left?" 5, several children shouted. "That's right. And how do we write that as a fraction?" 5/8, a boy answered. "Perfect, Noah. You're understanding this very well." Marcus watched the interaction with fascination. James was a natural teacher. He had endless patience, explained complex concepts in simple ways, and clearly loved seeing the students grasp new concepts. "Mr. Williams?" the foundation coordinator called him. "Shall we speak with the school administration?" Marcus reluctantly stepped away from the window. "I wanted to keep watching James teach, but I was afraid of being recognized if I stayed too long in the same place." The school principal, Mrs. Margaret, was a woman around 50 who received visitors from the foundation with a mix of hope and skepticism. "I'm not quite understanding," she said. "You want to renovate our school for free?" "Our foundation is dedicated to helping rural schools with limited resources," explained the coordinator. "You were recommended by our research department as a school that does exemplary work despite structural limitations. But it must cost a lot of money." "The cost is not a problem. Our donors are committed to this project." "And you don't want anything in return? No kind of publicity or recognition?" "Nothing. We prefer to remain completely anonymous." Mrs. Margaret looked at Marcus, who had introduced himself as a technical advisor for the foundation. "And you? You're not saying much." "I'm just here to assess technical matters," said Marcus, trying to disguise his voice. "My job is to ensure the renovation is done in the best way possible." At that moment, James entered the room. "Mrs. Margaret, the children are asking about the visitors." He stopped when he saw Marcus. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to remember where he had seen that face before. "Teacher James," said Mrs. Margaret, "these gentlemen are from a foundation that wants to renovate our school." "Renovate?" James looked from Mrs. Margaret to the coordinator, then to Marcus. "What kind of renovation?" "Complete," replied the coordinator. "New roof, paint, equipment, computers. Everything needed to modernize the structure." "And how much will that cost?" "It won't cost the school anything. It's a donation." James kept looking at Marcus with growing suspicion. "Mr. Williams, isn't it? Have we met before?" Marcus felt his heart race. "I don't think we have. Maybe my face looks familiar." "Yeah, maybe." James didn't seem convinced. And does your foundation help many schools? This will be our first, admitted the coordinator, but our donors are very committed to the project. Interesting. And how did you hear about our school? Marcus realized James was asking exactly the right questions. His son had always been smart, and now he was clearly suspicious of the motives behind the overly generous donation. We conduct research on rural schools that need support, said the coordinator, following the script they had agreed upon. Your school was recommended by educators in the region. By which educators? The question caught the coordinator off guard. He looked at Marcus, seeking help. I'd rather not reveal specific sources, Marcus said quickly. Sometimes recommendations are confidential. James stared directly at him. Why confidential? To avoid other schools feeling disadvantaged if they're not chosen. It wasn't a very convincing answer, and James clearly wasn't buying the story. Do you have documentation for the foundation? Registration, that sort of thing? The coordinator showed the papers Marcus had arranged. Everything was legal and official, but James kept studying every detail with a lawyer's attention. Rural Education Foundation John Dewey, he read. Established 2 weeks ago. Marcus cursed inwardly. James had noticed the foundation's recent creation date. Sometimes it takes time to formalize the paperwork, he said, but the work has been planned for months. I see. James handed back the documents. What if we don't care for the renovation? What do you mean? Asked Mrs. Margaret, surprised. If we decide we don't want to accept this donation? James! Mrs. Margaret was scandalized. Why wouldn't we want to accept? Because overly generous donations always come with some strings attached. No one spends hundreds of thousands of dollars without wanting something in return. Marcus admired his son's intelligence and caution, even as he worried that James might discover the truth. Sometimes people just want to help, said the coordinator. No ulterior motives. Maybe, James replied, but his tone made it clear he didn't believe it. The tension in the air was palpable. Mrs. Margaret clearly wanted to accept the donation, but respected James too much to ignore his concerns. How about this? Marcus suggested finally. Give us a few days to think it over. There's no rush. If you decide you don't want our help, we'll respect your decision. That sounds fair, Mrs. Margaret said quickly, before James could object. Great. We'll return next week to hear your decision. During the trip back to Austin, the foundation coordinator expressed his concerns. Mr. Mitchell, I think the teacher suspects something. He asked very specific questions. I know James has always been like that, smart and suspicious. James, you know him. Marcus realized he had slipped up. He reminds me of someone I knew years ago. If he finds out you're the donor, he might refuse the renovation. I know. So what now? Do we cancel the project? Marcus thought about the rundown school, the children who deserved better study conditions, the work James was doing despite all the limitations. No, we'll continue. If James discovers the truth and refuses the donation, at least we'll know we tried. And if he accepts without knowing it's you, then we'll do the best renovation possible and step away. What matters is helping those children. The following week, Marcus returned to St. John's Valley with his heart in his throat. If James had discovered his identity, being thrown out of the school would be humiliating. But if James accepted the donation without knowing the truth, it would be a small but significant victory. Mrs. Margaret greeted them with a cautious smile. We've talked a lot about your proposal, she said, and we've decided to accept. Marcus felt immense relief. That's great. And Teacher James? Did he agree? He agreed, but with conditions. What conditions? He wants to actively participate in the renovation planning. He doesn't want anything done without consulting the teachers and the school community. Of course, that makes perfect sense. And he wants to get to know the foundation representatives better, especially you, Mr. Williams. Marcus's heart sank. Why especially me? He said there's something familiar about you that he can't quite place, and that he doesn't feel comfortable accepting help from strangers. Marcus glanced at the coordinator, who shrugged discreetly. He was in an impossible situation. If he agreed to work closely with James, he would inevitably be recognized. But if he backed out now, he would lose the chance to help the school. "All right," he said finally. "It will be a pleasure to work closely with Teacher James." "Great." He's waiting in the teacher's lounge to discuss the details. Marcus walked to the teacher's lounge like a condemned man heading to the gallows. James was alone, grading papers on the small table that served as a workspace for the school's 3 teachers. "Mr. Williams," he said without looking up from the papers, "have a seat, please." Marcus sat in an uncomfortable chair and waited. James finished grading a test, made a note at the top of the page, and only then looked directly at him. "Are you going to tell me who you really are? Or are we going to keep pretending we don't know each other?" Marcus felt the world spin. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Marcus Mitchell, my father." James spoke the words with a calm that was more frightening than any shout. "Did you think I wouldn't recognize you?" The game was over. Marcus bowed his head, defeated. "When did you find out?" "From the first visit. You may have aged and grown a beard, but you're still the same person who raised me for 25 years. Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted to see how far you'd take this charade, and I wanted to understand why you were here." Marcus looked up to meet James's gaze. There was no anger there, just deep sadness and weariness. "I came because I wanted to help. The school needs repairs. The children deserve better conditions." "Stop lying." James's voice rose for the first time. "You came here because you found out I'm alive and want to buy me back with grand gestures. That's not true, isn't it? Then explain how a foundation created 2 weeks ago decided our specific school needed help. Explain how a technical advisor talks exactly like my father and has the same mannerisms as him." Marcus fell silent. Any explanation he offered would only confirm James was right. "You want the truth?" he said finally. "Yes, I came here because I found out you're alive. Yes, I wanted to understand who you'd become. And yes, I thought maybe helping the school could show I've changed." "And have you?" The simple question caught him off guard. "I think so. I hope so." "Why? What changed about you in the last 3 years?" Marcus considered the question. What had really changed in him besides the pain of losing his son? "I met Tyler and Madison," he said slowly, "and I realized I spent my whole life seeing you as an extension of my own ambitions, instead of trying to understand who you really were." "Go on." "I realized you're a better man than I ever was, that you found purpose and happiness doing exactly what I always criticized, and that your daughters are amazing children because you and Sarah raised them with love instead of impossible expectations." James listened silently, showing no emotion. "And now? What do you want from me?" "Honestly? I don't know. I wanted your forgiveness, but I know I don't deserve it. I wanted a second chance, but I know I ruined the first one. So maybe I just want to do something I know you'd approve of, help children who need it. Without wanting anything in return. Without wanting anything in return." James stood and walked to the small window in the room. He stared out at the playground where some children were playing during recess. "You know what's the saddest part of all this?" he said without turning around. "What?" "That I had to fake my own death to finally feel free to be who I always wanted to be." The words hit Marcus like punches. "James, You raised me to be an extension of you. When I had my own opinions, I was rebellious. When I had different dreams, I was immature. When I wanted to help people, I was naive. I was trying to prepare you for the reality of the world. You were trying to turn me into a younger version of yourself. And when you realized it wasn't working, you intensified the pressure instead of questioning whether your methods were wrong." Marcus knew James was right, but hearing the accusation directly from his son was more painful than he'd imagined. "How can I fix this?" James turned to face him. "You can't. Some damage is permanent, but you can stop trying to control my life. I didn't even know where you were until a few weeks ago. But as soon as you found out, you came after me in disguise, created a fake foundation, invented an elaborate story to get close to me. That's not stopping control. It's just a more sophisticated version of the same thing." Marcus realized He'd once again approached the situation like a business problem to be solved, instead of an emotional matter to be handled with patience and humility. "You're right. I'm sorry. I don't want your apologies. I want you to stop trying to fix me or recover me as if I were a failed investment. Then what do you want me to do? Go away. Leave me alone. And if you really want to help this school, do it without getting personally involved." James's absolute rejection was like a stab in the heart. Marcus had expected anger, arguments, even tears. He hadn't expected this calculated, final coldness. "What about Tyler and Madison? Can I still be their grandfather?" "That's not my decision, it's Sarah's, but if she allows it, act like a normal grandfather would, without using the children as a means to get to me." Marcus nodded, defeated. "And the school renovation? Go ahead. The children need it, but I don't want to see you around here again." "James..." Marcus tried to find words for one last attempt. "There's nothing left for us to talk about. Please leave." Marcus stood up slowly, feeling the weight of all his 62 years. He had arrived there hoping for reconciliation and left with the confirmation that some mistakes cannot be undone. "For what it's worth," he said, stopping at the door, "I'm proud of the man you've become, and I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that." James didn't respond, just turned to look out the window again. Marcus left the school and drove back to Austin in a fog of sadness and acceptance. He had found his son alive, but discovered that it might be better for James if he were really dead. The renovation of the St. John's Valley School was completed 3 months later. Marcus supervised everything from a distance, through the foundation coordinator, without ever returning to the site in person. He received photos of the final result, a transformed school with airy, well-equipped classrooms, a modern computer lab, an expanded library, and a new sports court. On Inauguration Day, he received a simple letter addressed to his company. He immediately recognized James's handwriting. "The school turned out beautiful. The children are radiant. Thank you for doing this for them, not for me. Jay." It was the closest thing to gratitude he would receive from his son. He kept the letter in a special drawer and decided it would be enough. In the following months, Marcus devoted himself completely to being a grandfather to Tyler and Madison. Sarah, perhaps sensing his genuine transformation, began allowing more frequent and less supervised visits. "You've really changed," she said one afternoon, as they watched the children play on the school's renovated playground. "Tyler and Madison talk about their grandpa with so much affection. They've taught me more about parenting in a few months than I learned in decades trying to raise James." "What do you mean?" "With James, I always tried to shape behaviors, teach lessons, prepare him for the future. With Tyler and Madison, I simply enjoy who they are, and that makes a difference, all the difference. Tyler shows me his bridge drawings and I marvel at his creativity instead of questioning whether it's a viable career. Madison tells me her made-up stories and I'm fascinated by her imagination instead of trying to steer her towards something more practical." Sarah smiled. "That's how all children should be treated. That's how James should have been treated." They stayed silent for a moment, watching the children. "Mr. Mitchell, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. Are you happy now, with this new life?" Marcus thought about the question. Was he happy? He had definitively lost his son, discovered he had been a terrible father, and had to accept that some mistakes cannot be fixed. But he had also found real purpose for the first time, discovered the pleasure of relationships based on unconditional love, and learned that true success isn't measured in money. "I'm different," he said finally. "I don't know if happier, but definitely more complete." "What do you mean?" "I spent 60 years building a company, accumulating wealth, trying to impress people. But in recent months, the times I felt most fulfilled were teaching Tyler about engineering or listening to Madison's stories. Small moments that are worth nothing financially, but mean everything in human terms." That night, alone in his house, Marcus took a decision that had been brewing for weeks. He called his lawyer. "I want to make changes to my will." "What kind of changes?" "I want to leave half the company to James, managed through a trust he can't refuse. The other half goes toward expanding the educational foundation." "And for your granddaughters?" Education funds managed by their mother, no direct inheritance. I don't want them growing up thinking money solves everything. This is a significant change. It's the right change. And I want to include a specific clause. If James wants to sell his share of the company to invest in public education, he has my full support. Understood. One last thing. None of this should be communicated to James while I'm alive. He should only find out through the will. Marcus hung up and felt lighter. He had found a way to support James's dreams without trying to control him. If his son wanted to use the inheritance to expand his educational work, he would have the resources to do so. If he simply wanted to continue teaching at a rural school, the foundation would ensure he had all the necessary structure. It was the best he could do to fix the mistakes of a lifetime. In the year that followed, Marcus became a constant presence in Tyler and Madison's lives. He took them to visit construction sites, taught basic engineering principles, patiently listened to Madison's elaborate stories, and most importantly, he was simply present. Tyler developed a genuine passion for math and engineering, but also for helping others, clearly influenced by the stories his mother told about his teacher father. "Grandpa," he said one afternoon, "when I grow up, I want to build beautiful schools for poor children like you did. That's a beautiful dream, Tyler. Dad helps children too, right? By teaching them." "Yes, he does, and he's very good at it." "When will I get to meet Dad?" The question took Marcus by surprise. Sarah had told the children about their father, but they hadn't had direct contact with James for years. "I don't know, Tyler. That depends on many things." "On you too?" The innocence of the question revealed that Tyler had picked up more about the family situation than the adults realized. "Partly, yes. So can you make Dad come back? Like you made the school beautiful?" Marcus knelt to be at the boy's eye level. "Some things can't be fixed with money or renovations, Tyler. Relationships between people need to be fixed with time, patience, and real changes. Are you trying to fix it?" "I am. But Dad needs to want to, too." Tyler thought for a moment. "He doesn't want to?" "Not yet. But he loves us, right? Mom said he loves us." "Very much. Sometimes loving someone means staying away to avoid causing more pain." Tyler nodded, as if he understood, though Marcus doubted an 8-year-old could truly grasp the complexity of the situation. "Grandpa?" "Yes?" "When I was little, I was afraid you'd be like the mean parents in movies. But you're cool." The innocent observation struck Marcus deeply. Tyler had grown up hearing about an absent, rejecting grandfather, but now knew him as someone caring and present. "Thank you, Tyler. You and Madison have taught me to be a better person." "How did we teach you?" "By showing me how good it feels to love someone without wanting to change them." "I love you exactly as you are." That night, Marcus wrote another letter to James. Unlike previous attempts, this time he didn't ask for forgiveness or try to justify his past mistakes. He simply described special moments he had shared with Tyler and Madison. "Today, Tyler asked me how to calculate the weight a bridge can hold. I spent 2 hours explaining basic structural engineering concepts to an 8-year-old, and he understood everything. Madison made up a story about a princess who builds castles for orphaned children. They have your intelligence and your compassion. They're amazing children, and you should be proud of them even from a distance." He didn't send the letter. He kept it with others he had written but never mailed. Perhaps one day James would want to read them. Or perhaps they would simply serve as a record of a father learning too late to love without conditions. The following spring, Marcus's educational foundation had grown significantly. With abundant resources and a dedicated team, they had already renovated 12 public schools in small towns across Texas and Tennessee. Marcus made sure to visit each project personally, always accompanied by Tyler when possible. "Grandpa, why do you like fixing schools so much?" Madison asked during a visit to a newly renovated school in Fort Worth. "Because education is the most important thing we can give a child. More important than money, than expensive gifts, than anything else." "More important than love?" Marcus smiled. Madison always asked the most direct questions. "No, my dear, nothing is more important than love. But education is a way to show love to children who might not receive other kinds of love at home." Tyler listened to the conversation attentively. "Is that why our dad became a teacher? To give love to children who need it? Exactly. So you and Dad are doing the same thing, just in different ways. Tyler's insightful observation struck something deep within Marcus. Yes, in a way, he and James were trying to achieve similar goals, providing better opportunities for underprivileged children. The difference lay in their approach. James worked directly with the children, while Marcus worked on infrastructure. That's a good way to think about it, he agreed. If you're doing the same thing, why don't you do it together? Tyler's innocent question ended the discussion, but planted a seed in Marcus's mind. That night, he had an idea. What if he could create a bridge between his work and James's without forcing direct contact? What if he could indirectly support his son's work in a way that didn't seem like an attempt to control? On Monday, he called his foundation coordinator. I want to create a scholarship program for rural teachers. Teachers who excel in working with underprivileged communities receive financial support to expand their projects. What kind of support? Supplementary salary, resources for teaching materials, funding for professional development courses. Enough so they can dedicate themselves fully to teaching without financial worries. How will we identify these teachers? Discrete research. We visit rural schools, talk to principals and communities, identify educators who are making a real difference. And the criteria? Genuine dedication to students, pedagogical innovation, positive impact on the community, and especially teachers working in under-resourced schools but achieving exceptional results. Marcus didn't mention that he had one specific teacher in mind, but he knew James would easily qualify for the program. In the following months, the foundation team visited dozens of rural schools across Tennessee and Texas. They created a detailed database about teachers and innovative educational projects. As expected, James's name quickly appeared in the searches. Principals from other schools in the region mentioned him as an example of dedication. Parents of former students spoke about the transformative impact he had had on their children's education. This teacher James from St. John's Valley School is mentioned in all our research, said the coordinator during a meeting. He seems exceptionally dedicated. What information do we have about him? He has worked at the school for 3 years, transformed the academic results in the region, uses innovative methods, and apparently uses part of his own salary to help underprivileged students. Everyone we spoke to talks about him with admiration. He seems an ideal candidate for our scholarship. Should we approach him? Not directly. Let's work through the municipal education department. That will make everything more official and less personal. Marcus knew that a direct approach would raise James's suspicions, but if the scholarship came through official channels as recognition for educational merit, his son would be more likely to accept. The strategy worked. 3 months later, James received a notice from the Municipal Education Department informing him that he had been selected for a Rural Education Excellence Scholarship. The scholarship included a significant salary supplement, an annual budget for teaching materials, and funding for specialization courses in pedagogy. Teacher James has been awarded the program, the coordinator reported. He accepted the scholarship and is already using the resources to expand projects at the school. What kind of projects? He is creating a community garden where he teaches environmental science. He also organized a reading project where older students help the younger ones. And he managed to bring art and music classes to the school for the first time. Marcus smiled. James was using the resources exactly as he had hoped, to directly benefit the children, not for personal gain. And he doesn't suspect that our foundation is behind the scholarship. It doesn't seem so. The official documentation comes from the education department, and they genuinely believe the program is a government initiative supported by several private organizations. Perfect. In the following months, Marcus discreetly followed James's work through foundation reports. His son was flourishing with the additional resources, creating innovative projects that transformed not only the school but the entire St. John's Valley community. The interesting thing, the coordinator commented during a meeting, is that this teacher James is achieving results we normally only see in schools with much more infrastructure. How so? The literacy rates of St. John's Valley children have risen significantly. The dropout rates have fallen to almost zero. and other schools in the region are adopting methods he developed. Marcus felt immense pride. His son was becoming a reference in rural education, exactly as he had always had the potential to be. There's another interesting aspect, the coordinator continued. The school's children are producing science projects that rival much better equipped urban schools. A 12-year-old student created an irrigation system that is being tested on several farms in the region. A 12-year-old student? Mentored by teacher James. He has a special talent for identifying potential in children and supporting them to develop their talents. Marcus remembered how James had tried to do similar projects as a teenager and how he had discouraged those distractions from more serious studies. That night he called Sarah. "I've been following James's work through educational reports. He's doing incredible things." "He really is," she agreed. "In his recent letters, he talks about projects he's developing. He seems more excited than ever." "Sarah, can I ask a question? Does James know our foundation renovated his school?" "He does, and he thanks us for it every week. Says it completely transformed the possibilities for his work." "But he doesn't know I was involved?" "No, and I don't plan on telling him." "Thank you." "Mr. Mitchell?" "Yes?" "Are you all right? You seem melancholy lately." Marcus thought about the question. Was he melancholy? Perhaps. He had found purpose and meaning in life, but at the cost of accepting that he might never regain the relationship with his son. "I am at peace," he said finally. "Sad, but at peace." "What do you mean?" "I've discovered that the most important thing I can do for James is to support his work without interfering in his life. It's a form of love I'm only learning now." Love from a distance. Exactly. In the years that followed, this dynamic became the new normal. Marcus continued to be a present and loving grandfather to Tyler and Madison. His foundation grew and became a benchmark in supporting rural education, and James continued his transformative work, unaware that his father had become his biggest silent supporter. Tyler developed a real passion for engineering and mathematics, but also for social issues. He started talking about building schools when he grew up, combining the interests of his grandfather and father in ways that Marcus found deeply touching. "Grandpa," he said one December afternoon near his 10th birthday, "when I grow up I want to work with you and with Dad." "What do you mean?" "You build beautiful schools, Dad teaches the children. I can learn both things and make schools that are beautiful and teach well." Marcus felt his heart tighten. Tyler had intuitively found a way to unite the two family approaches to education. "That's a wonderful plan, Tyler. But for that, Dad would have to know you, right?" "Why do you say that?" "Because if you worked together, you could help more children." The simple, clear logic of a 10-year-old exposed the tragedy of the entire family conflict. "You're right, Tyler. But sometimes adults make things more complicated than they should be." "Why?" "Because we carry hurts from the past that sometimes prevent us from seeing the possibilities of the present." Tyler became thoughtful. "Are you hurt by Dad?" "No, I'm hurt with myself for not having been a better father." "And is Dad hurt by you?" "He is, and it's justified." "But if you've already changed, why doesn't Dad forgive?" The innocent question touched the heart of the dilemma. Why couldn't James accept that Marcus had changed? Because changes take time to be proven, Tyler, and because some wounds take a long time to heal. Like when I broke my arm. It hurt for a long time even after the doctor fixed it. Exactly like that. Tyler nodded as if he understood perfectly. That night, Marcus had a revelation. Perhaps it was time to stop waiting for James's forgiveness and simply accept that some relationships cannot be repaired. But that didn't mean he should stop trying to be the person James would be proud to call his father. On the 5th anniversary of discovering that James was alive, Marcus took stock of his transformed life. He had become a dedicated grandfather, a genuine philanthropist, and a secret supporter of his son's work. It wasn't the relationship he had dreamed of, but it was the relationship possible, and perhaps that was enough. Tyler, now almost 11, demonstrated impressive maturity. Madison, at 9, maintained her vibrant creativity, but had also developed an interest in social issues. Both spoke with growing affection about their distant father and with genuine love about their present grandfather. "Grandpa," said Madison one afternoon, "Mom said maybe we can meet Dad in person someday." Marcus looked at Sarah, who confirmed with a nod. "James is considering a visit," she explained. "Not to stay, but to meet his daughters personally." Marcus's heart raced. "When?" "Perhaps by the end of the year. He's finishing some projects at school and might take a vacation in the summer." "And about me?" Sarah hesitated. "He said if you meet, it will be civil, but he doesn't want talks about the past or attempts at reconciliation." "I understand. Mr. Marcus, will you be prepared for that?" Marcus pondered the question. Was he ready to see James again, knowing he'd be treated as a distant acquaintance instead of a father? "I'll be prepared for whatever is best for Tyler and Madison," he said finally, and he realized that answer perfectly summarized how his perspective had changed. What mattered no longer were his own needs or wounded ego. What mattered was the well-being of the children he had learned to love unconditionally. That year's Christmas would be different from all the others. For the first time, there was a chance for the whole family to be together, even if only physically. Marcus began to emotionally prepare for the most important and potentially most difficult meeting of his life. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Marcus truly changed and deserved a second chance with James? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.